June 1984. India was still shaking. The dust hadn't settled after Operation Blue Star, and across the country the mood was heavy, like the air right before a thunderstorm. Folks weren't just upset, they were simmering. Inside the corridors of power in New Delhi. Late evening at the Prime Minister's residence, 1 Safdarjung Road, security officers stood stiff, their boots echoing against marble floors. Inside her office, Indira Gandhi sat behind a heavy wooden desk, flipping through intelligence reports. Her face looked calm, but the room felt tight, like something big was brewing. Across from her stood Rameshwar Nath Kao, one of the country's top intelligence minds. He cleared his throat. Kao, quiet but firm. Madam Prime Minister, the threat level has gone way up. We're getting chatter from multiple sources. There are calls for revenge. Indira didn't even blink. She leaned back slightly, fingers resting together. Indira Gandhi. That was expected. Kao shifted his weight. Madam, with respect, I strongly recommend reviewing your security staff, especially those assigned close to you. That line hung in the air like smoke, because they both knew exactly what he meant. After Operation Blue Star, many Sikh personnel in security positions had become a sensitive issue, but Indira Gandhi wasn't the type to panic or discriminate. She shook her head slowly. Indira Gandhi. No, I will not remove Sikh guards just because of fear. That would send the wrong message to the nation. Kao pressed his lips together. Inside his head, alarm bells were screaming. Outside, everything stayed polite. But the danger? Yeah, it was real. The streets were boiling. Across northern India, the fallout from Operation Blue Star hit hard. Inside the sacred complex of Golden Temple in Amritsar, heavy fighting had taken place between the Indian Army and militants led by Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. The damage shocked people worldwide. Rumors flew like wildfire. Anger spread fast. And in many Sikh communities, grief turned to rage. Inside small houses and village courtyards, heated conversations played out every night. A conversation that changed everything. In one modest home in Punjab, 2 young men sat cross-legged on the floor. One of them was Beant Singh. The other, quieter but intense, was Satwant Singh. Both served in the Prime Minister's security detail. Both carried government-issued weapons. And both were watching events unfold with growing anger. A radio crackled in the background. News bulletins replayed the aftermath of the assault on the Golden Temple. Beant slammed his palm on the floor. Beant Singh, angry. They stormed the Golden Temple, man, the holiest place we have. You telling me that's just politics? Satwant didn't answer immediately. He stared at the floor, then spoke quietly. People won't forget this. The room went silent. Outside, a dog barked somewhere in the dark. Inside, something dangerous had begun forming. Not yet a plan, not yet violence, but resentment? Yeah, it was taking root. Warning signs that couldn't be ignored. Back in New Delhi, intelligence agencies were working overtime. Files stacked up fast. Intercepted messages, anonymous letters, threat reports. Many mentioned revenge. Some specifically named Indira Gandhi. At South Block, senior officials gathered around a large conference table. One officer flipped open a file. Sir, we're seeing increased hostility within certain extremist groups. Some talk openly about targeting the Prime Minister. The room went dead quiet. Another officer spoke. There's also concern about insider threats. That word hit hard. Insider, meaning someone close, someone trusted, someone armed.
The decision that would echo through history. Security officials made repeated recommendations. Remove Sikh bodyguards from close proximity. Increase distance between the Prime Minister and armed personnel. Reorganize security layers. But Indira Gandhi stayed firm. One morning, during a security briefing, her tone turned sharp. Indira Gandhi. If I remove them, it sends the message that I do not trust Sikhs. I will not divide this country through fear. The room fell silent again. No one dared argue further. But inside, many officers were thinking the same thing. This decision could cost lives, and history would later prove them right. A routine that became dangerous. By October 1984, life around the Prime Minister followed a predictable routine. Every morning, she walked from her residence at 1 Safdarjung Road to her office at 5 Akbar Road. A short path, about 40 to 50 meters, lined with guards. Simple, routine, safe, or at least it looked that way. Among the guards assigned to that path were Beant Singh and Satwant Singh. Trusted, armed, close, very close, too close. A quiet conversation before the storm. One evening in late October, Beant Singh spoke quietly to Satwant Singh near their duty post. No shouting, no dramatic gestures, just low voices, but the words carried weight. Beant Singh, low voice. History remembers those who act. Satwant glanced around, making sure no one was listening. Satwant, you sure about this? Beant didn't answer immediately. He looked straight ahead, watching shadows stretch across the compound. Then he spoke. Beant Singh, some things can't be forgiven. The wind rustled leaves overhead, and in that quiet moment, the line between anger and action began to fade. October 30th, 1984, the last speech. Just one day before the assassination, Indira Gandhi traveled to Bhubaneswar. There, she delivered a speech that would later be replayed endlessly. Standing before a crowd, her voice rang strong. Indira Gandhi, speech excerpt. I am here today. I may not be here tomorrow. I shall continue to serve until my last breath. People clapped loudly, but those words, they would soon feel haunting, almost prophetic. The night before. October 30th turned into October 31st. Inside the Prime Minister's residence, lights dimmed one by one. Security rotations continued as usual. Logs were signed, weapons checked, positions assigned. Among those on duty for the next morning, Beant Singh, Satwant Singh. No one raised alarms. No one suspected what was coming. The routine looked normal. Everything looked calm. But beneath that calm surface, October 31st, 1984. Early morning calm. Morning broke quietly over New Delhi. The sun was just rising, casting long shadows across the Prime Minister's residence at 1 Safdarjung Road. Birds chirped. Gardeners trimmed hedges. Staff moved around like any other normal day. But history? Yeah, it was about to flip upside down. Inside the residence, Indira Gandhi had already started her day. She was known for waking up early, disciplined, sharp, always on schedule. Her plan that morning was simple. She was scheduled to be interviewed by British actor and filmmaker Peter Ustinov for a television documentary. Nothing unusual, just another official morning. Or at least, that's what it looked like. 8:30 a.m., final preparations. Inside her room, Indira Gandhi dressed carefully. She chose a saffron-colored sari with a black border, a detail that would later become unforgettable in photographs. Her personal staff reviewed the day's schedule. A secretary stepped in quietly. Secretary, Madam, the interview team is ready at the office. Indira nodded. Indira Gandhi, all right, let's not keep them waiting. Her voice was calm, focused, like always. Outside, security personnel checked their posts. Guards stood along the short pathway connecting 1 Safdarjung Road to 5 Akbar Road, where her office was located. Among them stood Beant Singh and Satwant Singh, both armed, both on duty, both hiding something heavy inside. 9 a.m., the walk begins. At around 9 a.m., Indira Gandhi stepped out of her residence. With her were Narayan Singh, Rameshwar Dayal, and R.K. Dewan. They walked casually along the narrow garden path. The distance? Barely 50 to 60 meters. A short walk, something she did almost every day. Leaves crunched under her sandals. A few staff members stood nearby. Everything looked routine. Nothing looked dangerous. But right ahead, standing near the gate, were Beant Singh and Satwant Singh, waiting. 9:20 a.m., the moment that changed history. The group approached the wicket gate. Beant Singh stepped forward. He folded his hands slightly, like greeting her. Beant Singh, Sat Sri Akal, madam. Indira Gandhi smiled faintly. Indira Gandhi, Sat Sri Akal. That was the last greeting she ever gave. Without warning, Beant Singh pulled out his .38 revolver and fired. Bang! 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 3 shots rang out, point blank. Indira Gandhi collapsed instantly. Before anyone could react, Satwant Singh stepped forward. He raised his Sten gun and unleashed a burst of bullets. Va-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. More than 25 rounds fired. The sound echoed through the compound like thunder. Birds scattered into the sky. Staff froze in shock. For a split second, nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. Chaos erupts. Security officers rushed toward the scene. One officer screamed, "Officer, drop your weapons! Drop them now!" Beant Singh didn't run, didn't hide. He threw his revolver down calmly, then said something that would later be repeated across newspapers and reports. Beant Singh, I have done what I had to do. Now you do what you have to do. Satwant Singh also dropped his weapon moments later, but before they could be fully secured, other security personnel opened fire. Shots rang out again. Beant Singh was shot and killed on the spot. Satwant Singh was hit multiple times, but survived, badly wounded. Blood stained the pathway. The garden that once looked peaceful now looked like a war zone.
Meanwhile, Indira Gandhi lay motionless on the ground, her sari soaked in blood. Staff rushed forward in panic. Someone shouted, "Staff member, get the car, hurry!" There was no ambulance immediately available, so they carried her into an official vehicle. Her body was lifted carefully, but fast. Every second mattered now. The car sped through the streets of New Delhi, horns blaring, traffic forced aside. Destination? All India Institute of Medical Sciences, commonly called AIIMS. 9:32 a.m. Arrival at AIIMS. The car screeched to a stop outside the emergency entrance. Doctors and nurses rushed forward. Stretchers rolled in fast. Medical staff began emergency treatment immediately. Inside the emergency room, chaos ruled. Doctors shouted instructions. Doctor, pulse? Nurse, no pulse, sir. Doctor, start resuscitation now. Blood transfusions began. Multiple surgeons were called in urgently. More than 80 units of blood were arranged. India's top doctors worked non-stop, but the injuries were severe, devastating. She had suffered multiple gunshot wounds. The odds were slim, very slim. News begins to leak. Back at the Prime Minister's residence, confusion ruled. Phones rang non-stop. Security units locked down the entire area. Officials rushed in and out. At government offices across Delhi, whispers began spreading. Something big happened. Shots fired. Prime Minister injured. But official confirmation still missing. Radio stations stayed silent. Television channels didn't broadcast immediately. Inside government rooms, panic simmered under controlled faces. 2:20 p.m. Official confirmation. After hours of desperate medical attempts, the final word came. At 2:20 p.m., doctors declared Indira Gandhi was dead. The announcement spread like wildfire. Across government buildings, across homes, across the nation, shock hit like a punch to the chest. India had just lost its prime minister, assassinated by her own bodyguards. The nation holds its breath. Crowds gathered outside AIIMS. Some cried openly, some stood silent, some refused to believe the news.
Inside government headquarters, emergency meetings began immediately. Senior leaders rushed into action. Among them was her son, Rajiv Gandhi. Within hours, decisions had to be made, leadership had to be maintained, because the country was already trembling, and what came next would be even darker.
October 31st, 1984. Afternoon turns dark. By late afternoon, the confirmation had spread across New Delhi like wildfire. People gathered around radios, offices shut down early, streets that were busy just hours ago started filling with anxious crowds. At 2:20 p.m., doctors at all India Institutes of Medical Sciences had officially declared Indira Gandhi dead. But the real storm? Yeah, it was just getting started. Inside government headquarters, emergency decisions. Inside government buildings, senior leaders gathered in tense silence. Among them was Rajiv Gandhi, Indira Gandhi's son. He had just rushed back from West Bengal, where he had been traveling earlier that day. His face looked pale but controlled. Officials surrounded him, speaking quickly, almost over each other. Senior official: "Sir, the situation outside is unstable. Crowds are gathering in several areas." Another officer added, "Officer, we need immediate leadership. The country cannot remain without direction." The room felt heavy. There wasn't time to grieve. There was only time to act. Later that evening, Rajiv Gandhi was sworn in as Prime Minister, an urgent move to maintain stability. But outside those buildings, things were starting to spiral. Anger turns into violence. News of the assassination spread fast, through radios, word of mouth, and rumors. And soon, the anger turned toward one group: Sikh communities. Because the assassins, Beant Singh and Satwant Singh, were Sikhs. In several neighborhoods of Delhi, small groups began gathering. At first, it looked like shouting, then pushing, then violence. Shops were attacked, vehicles were burned, homes were targeted. Within hours, scattered violence turned into organized mobs, and the city's mood, it shifted from shock to rage. A family hiding in fear. In one crowded neighborhood of Delhi, a Sikh family locked themselves inside their house. The father paced nervously. Outside, loud voices echoed, shouting, angry slogans, glass breaking somewhere down the street. Inside the house, his teenage son whispered, "Papa, what's happening outside?" The father looked toward the door, jaw tight. "Stay quiet. Don't open the door no matter what you hear." His wife pulled their younger daughter close. Outside, footsteps grew louder. Someone shouted, "Check every house." The family held their breath. Inside many homes across Delhi, scenes like this were playing out. Fear was spreading faster than the news itself. November 1st, 1984. Violence explodes. By the next morning, November 1st, the situation worsened drastically. Large mobs moved through neighborhoods. Some carried sticks, others iron rods. In several places, Sikh-owned businesses were burned. Homes were looted. Vehicles were set on fire. Black smoke rose into the sky across parts of Delhi. Police presence was limited in many areas, and in some places, response was delayed. That delay, it made things worse. Much worse.
Streets turned into war zones. By afternoon, several neighborhoods looked like battlefields. Burned buses blocked roads. Shattered glass covered sidewalks. Smoke hung heavy in the air. A shopkeeper stood outside his destroyed store, staring at the damage. His hands trembled. Everything gone, just like that. Nearby, people ran carrying water buckets, trying to control spreading fires. But many fires burned out of control. Sirens echoed through the streets. Hospitals began filling with injured people. Doctors worked non-stop again, just like the day before. Government struggles to control the situation. Inside official offices, tension reached new heights. Reports poured in from across Delhi, each report worse than the last. Multiple fires reported in East Delhi. Another officer. Violence spreading to new districts. Phones rang non-stop. Orders were issued. Security forces were mobilized. But restoring order across such a massive city? That wasn't easy. And time was slipping away. November 2 to 3, 1984. Violence spread beyond Delhi. The unrest didn't stay limited to Delhi. Reports came in from cities in Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, Bihar. In several places, violence broke out against Sikh communities. Trains were stopped. Vehicles were attacked. Many families fled their homes. Some hid in relief camps. Others sought protection in military areas. Fear ruled the streets. The army steps in. Eventually, the situation became too large for local police to handle. The government called in the army. Soldiers began patrolling major roads. Armored vehicles rolled through neighborhoods. Curfews were announced in several areas. Gradually, the violence started slowing. But the damage, it was already massive. Thousands of people had lost homes. Many had lost family members. And trust between communities had been badly shaken. Meanwhile, the surviving assassin. Back at the hospital, one key figure remained alive: Satwant Singh. He had survived the gunfire that killed Beant Singh, but he was badly injured, guarded heavily, watched day and night, because investigators needed answers, real answers. Who planned it? Was anyone else involved? Was this a lone act or part of a larger conspiracy? Those questions would soon lead to one of the most closely watched trials in Indian history. A nation in mourning. While violence slowly came under control, the country prepared for a final farewell. Crowds gathered to pay respects. People stood in long lines, waiting hours. Some cried openly. Others stood silent, hands folded. Radio broadcasts played solemn music. India wasn't just mourning a leader. It was mourning stability, certainty, and peace. And deep inside government buildings, investigators were already building the next chapter: the hunt for justice.
November 1984. The investigation kicks into high gear. In the days after the assassination, investigators moved fast. The government assigned the case to the Delhi police, supported by intelligence units. Every detail from the morning of October 31st, 1984, was re-examined. The crime scene at 1 Safdarjung Road remained sealed. Officers walked carefully along the same garden path where the shots had been fired. Bullet marks were recorded. Blood-stained ground was measured. Weapons were catalogued. The revolver used by Beant Singh and the Sten gun used by Satwant Singh became key evidence. Every shell casing told part of the story. But investigators believed something else. This wasn't just anger in a moment. This looked planned, and planning meant conspiracy. The only survivor, a key witness. Inside a guarded ward at All India Institutes of Medical Sciences, Satwant Singh lay recovering from gunshot wounds. His condition had stabilized, but he was under constant watch. Armed guards stood outside his room 24/7. Doctors treated his injuries, but investigators waited for one thing: questioning. Weeks passed before he was fit to speak. Finally, one day investigators entered his room. A senior officer pulled a chair close to the bed. The room stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then the questioning began. Investigator: Satwant, we need to know who helped you. This wasn't something that happened overnight. Satwant looked tired, pale, but calm. He stayed silent. The officer leaned forward. Investigator: you didn't plan this alone. Who else knew? Silence again. Heavy, uncomfortable. The kind of silence that makes a room feel smaller. Eventually, investigators began piecing together information from other sources. Family links, associates, movements before the assassination. And one name kept appearing: Kehar Singh. The suspicion around Kehar Singh.
Kehar Singh was related to Beant Singh. Investigators believed he had influenced the attackers. Phone records, visits, and witness statements were reviewed carefully. Some witnesses claimed that Beant Singh had discussed strong anger after Operation Blue Star. There were reports of private meetings, religious discussions, talk about revenge. Investigators began connecting the dots. Not perfect dots, but enough to build a theory. That theory became the backbone of the case. Building the case. Investigators collected witness testimonies, weapon reports, security duty logs, movement records, statements from colleagues. Security personnel who were present that morning were interviewed repeatedly. One officer described the moment after the shots. Security officer, statement: "I saw Beant Singh throw his revolver and say he had done his duty. Then other guards fired." Another staff member described the chaos. Staff member: "Everything happened so fast, nobody expected it from inside security." That word again, inside. An insider attack had shaken the entire security system, and now the country wanted answers. The trial begins. The case moved to court. Inside the courtroom, tension ran high. Journalists filled seats. Police stood along walls. Lawyers organized stacks of documents. At the center of the trial, Satwant Singh, Kehar Singh. The courtroom atmosphere felt tight, like pressure building inside a sealed container. Every hearing drew attention from across India. Every statement mattered.
Prosecution's argument. The prosecution laid out its case step by step. They argued that the assassination was not spontaneous. It was driven by revenge after Operation Blue Star. Kehar Singh influenced the attackers. Discussions before the assassination suggested planning. Witnesses were called. Documents were presented. Weapons were shown as evidence. A government lawyer addressed the court firmly. Prosecutor: "This was not an accident. This was a calculated act meant to eliminate the Prime Minister." His words echoed through the room. People listened carefully, because this wasn't just another case. This was history being judged. Defense pushed back. Defense lawyers fought hard. They argued that the evidence against Kehar Singh was circumstantial, meaning no direct proof. They challenged witness statements. They questioned the reliability of certain testimonies. Inside the courtroom, voices rose. Arguments went back and forth. At times, the atmosphere felt heated, like a storm waiting to break. Defense lawyer: "There is no direct evidence linking my client to planning this crime." That statement created doubt among some observers, but prosecutors remained confident. They believed their case was strong enough. The verdict. After months of hearings, arguments, and testimony, the court reached its decision. Both Satwant Singh and Kehar Singh were found guilty. The charges: murder, criminal conspiracy. The sentence: death penalty. The courtroom fell silent as the verdict was announced. No cheers, no shouting, just a heavy stillness. Because even justice felt heavy in a case like this. Final appeals and execution. Appeals were filed. Higher courts reviewed the case. Arguments continued, but ultimately the convictions were upheld. On January 6, 1989, both Satwant Singh and Kehar Singh were executed at Tihar jail. With that, the legal chapter of the assassination came to an end, but the emotional chapter, that lasted much longer. A nation still recovering. By the late 1980s, India had changed. Security around national leaders became stricter. Protocols were redesigned. Background checks became deeper. Trust had been shaken, and the memory of that October morning never faded. Because it wasn't just the loss of a prime minister. It was a reminder of how internal threats could change history in seconds.
November 1984, the final farewell. In the days after the assassination, the entire country moved into mourning. Crowds gathered in massive numbers across New Delhi.
People traveled from distant villages, towns, and cities, standing in long lines for hours just to catch one final glimpse of the leader who had dominated Indian politics for years. Her body was placed for public viewing. The atmosphere felt heavy, silent, almost unreal. Some people cried openly. Others stood stiff, hands folded, eyes fixed forward. One elderly man in line whispered to the person next to him, "I never thought I'd see this day. Not like this." Even those who had disagreed with her policies showed up. Because assassination, that hit different. That shook everyone. November 3rd, 1984. The state funeral. On November 3rd, the state funeral took place at Shakti Sthal. Foreign leaders arrived from across the world. Security was tighter than ever before. Military units lined the route. The gun carriage carrying her body moved slowly through the streets. Thousands stood silently as it passed. No shouting, no movement, just stillness. Among those present was her son, Rajiv Gandhi, now carrying the weight of leadership. As the final rituals began, the flames rose slowly. Smoke drifted into the sky. And with that moment, an era officially ended. A new prime minister under pressure. After the funeral, Rajiv Gandhi stepped fully into the role of prime minister. But this wasn't a smooth transition. It was pressure from every direction. Security threats, political tension, public grief, and international attention. Inside government offices, meetings stretched late into the night. Files stacked high on desks, emergency discussions became routine. One senior advisor spoke during a late-night meeting. "Sir, the country needs stability, fast decisions, clear direction." Rajiv listened quietly. He wasn't just dealing with politics. He was dealing with the aftermath of one of the most shocking assassinations in Indian history. The shadow of the riots. Even as the government stabilized, the memory of the violence that followed the assassination refused to fade. The 1984 anti-Sikh riots left deep scars across multiple regions. Thousands of families lost homes. Many had lost loved ones. Relief camps remained active for months. In several neighborhoods, damaged buildings stood as reminders of what had happened. Walls blackened by fire. Shuttered shops that never reopened. Families that never fully recovered. Inside one relief camp, volunteers distributed food and blankets. A man sat quietly in a corner, staring ahead. Someone asked him gently, "Have you contacted your relatives?" He shook his head slowly. "No, I don't even know who's left." Moments like that stayed in people's memories for decades, not just as news headlines, but as lived reality. Changes in security. No more taking chances. After the assassination, the Indian government completely overhauled security systems. What happened on October 31st, 1984, exposed serious vulnerabilities, especially insider threats. New security rules were introduced. Multiple protective layers became standard. Background checks were strengthened. Access points were redesigned. Specialized protection units were expanded. Eventually, elite security systems evolved into more structured arrangements, including highly trained protection details assigned to national leaders. Because after losing a prime minister to her own guards, nobody wanted to risk that again. Not even once.
The political impact. A nation moves forward. The assassination reshaped Indian politics. Elections were held soon after. Public emotions ran high. Sympathy for the Gandhi family influenced political momentum. Rajiv Gandhi led his party into elections during a period of national grief. Crowds attended rallies across the country. People wanted stability, they wanted closure, they wanted leadership, and the election results reflected that emotional wave. But governing after tragedy, that wasn't simple. Every decision carried pressure, every speech carried weight, because the memory of 1984 stayed fresh in everyone's mind. The memory that refused to fade. Over time, years passed.
New leaders came, new policies formed, new challenges appeared. But October 31st, 1984, that date stayed locked in history. Schools taught about it. News channels replayed archival footage. Books documented every detail. Historians studied the timeline again and again, because the assassination of a sitting prime minister by her own bodyguards was something rare, something shocking, something unforgettable. The global reaction. Around the world, governments reacted with shock. Foreign leaders sent condolences. International newspapers covered the assassination on front pages. Headlines described it as one of the most dramatic political assassinations of the 20th century. India's image abroad temporarily shifted from stability to crisis. But over time, diplomatic relations stabilized again. The country moved forward, slowly, carefully, but steadily. The human side of history. Behind the headlines, behind the politics, behind the investigations, there were human stories. Security officers who relived the moment again and again. Doctors at All India Institute of Medical Sciences who remembered the emergency rush that morning. Families affected by riots who rebuilt their lives piece by piece. And citizens who watched history unfold live through radios, newspapers, and word of mouth. For many people alive at the time, the memory stayed vivid. Where they were, what they heard, how they reacted. Moments like that become personal history, not just national history. The long shadow of Operation Blue Star. The assassination didn't happen in isolation. It was deeply connected to the fallout of Operation Blue Star. That operation changed relationships between communities. It triggered anger, fear, and eventually revenge. Historians often point to that chain of events as a turning point in modern Indian history, a moment where decisions led to consequences far beyond expectations. And those consequences, they lasted for years, sometimes decades. The final reflection. The assassination of Indira Gandhi wasn't just a crime, it was a moment that reshaped a nation. It forced leaders to rethink security. It changed political direction. It left emotional scars across communities. And it proved one harsh truth. Sometimes the greatest threats don't come from the outside. They come from the inside, unexpected, trusted, and close. And on October 31st, 1984, a short walk of barely 50 meters changed the course of Indian history forever. The end.